Hello, it's September 6th. I haven't updated this in a really long time. At the beginning of August, I started the Wicked book, the one that the Broadway musical is based off of. It's really good, but I will say you have to be like in the mood for like a fantasy style book like Lord of the Rings or something where everything is like explained in really florid language, but it's good. I mean, it's very well written, and I'm never bored while reading it. It's just slow to read, you know what I mean? And it's like 500 pages long, so that doesn't really help. My main impression right now is that it's pretty different from what happens in the musical. It seems like they've changed a lot of things when they made the musical. Some things are like, it just needs to be a little bit more interesting to be able to write songs about it. For instance, like the whole, like there are like 5 songs that take place while they're at Shiz. The school part of the book is actually quite short. Some things are definitely like kind of out of order or played more up or more down in the book than in the musical. So it's interesting to kind of compare, but overall it's good. It's just a little bit slow for me. Then while I was reading that, I read this graphic novel that one of my friends gave me called Puerto Rico Strong. It says, a comics anthology supporting Puerto Rico disaster relief and recovery. So it came out shortly after Hurricane Maria, and like all the proceeds I think go to support the recovery from that. A lot of it is focused on strength in the midst of tragedy and those kind of things. But then a lot of the comics in there too are also just kind of about like Puerto Rico's history and their culture, and I learned just a lot about like Puerto Rico in general. Yeah, I think the most interesting thing that I learned about was what they call in the book La Operación, or like the operation, obviously. Essentially, some scientists went to test a birth control procedure on Puerto Rican women without letting them know what the details were. So basically they were getting their tubes tied, and they thought this was like some sort of, like they were really not informing these women, and the women thought, oh, this could be, you know, a temporary thing, and then later I can, you know, untie my tubes. You know, obviously these days we know that that's not true, but this was before it was mainstream in the US. They were essentially testing this on like human subjects. So it was totally screwed up, and that was really interesting. That was something that I learned about Puerto Rico's history that I had never heard of before. So I learned a lot from reading this book, and I enjoyed it. The art is beautiful. There are a lot of different contributing artists, but yeah, it was really good. So thank you, Crystal, for getting me this book. I really enjoyed it. The other book that I'm reading right now is an audiobook, because I have a commute to get to work now, like 20 minutes, which isn't like super long, but it's enough to get in like a chapter or 2 of an audiobook. So I'm reading the first book of the Benti trilogy. I believe it's a trilogy. I've had this on my like to read list for a really long time. I don't know a lot about it. I remember that when I heard about like the premise of the book way forever ago, I was like, that sounds really interesting, and I put it on my TBR. But at this point, I don't really remember what it's about, but I've only listened to about 30 minutes of it right now. I like it so far. One thing that I really like about the audiobook is that the lady who does the voice doesn't speak in like an American or British English accent. It's not like an inner circle English accent. You know, she's very clearly like a native English speaker. Her English is great and very fluent, but it's not what is portrayed as like correct English in the media. I'm glad that they said, you know what, this chick lives in like future Africa world. Again, sorry, I'm not super familiar with like the lore yet, but like she lives in future Africa world. She's not gonna have an American accent. She's not gonna have a British accent. She's gonna have like the accent of the people who live there. And we just don't hear enough of that, you know? So anyway, that's my first impression, is like, mwah, love the accent. But yeah, it seems like it's gonna be good. And hopefully if I can listen to a lot of audiobooks in the next couple months, maybe I can get 20 books in this year, but I don't know, we'll see. Hello, it is October 3rd. It's Mean Girls Day. I'm wearing an outfit that doesn't match. So I think last time I updated you guys, I told you that I was reading Wicked, and I have since finished it, and I did enjoy it, but man, I had a really hard time about halfway through. I really liked the part where, you know, they're like at Shiz, because I think that's like what is really focused on in the musical, but as soon as I get kind of past that, it turns into like some like political drama. There's like some like affair stuff going on, and you know, I'm just not into that kind of stuff. So about halfway through, I like really lost interest. As I got towards the end and it's like leading up to the events of like the actual movie, The Wizard of Oz, I was like, into it again. So I thought that was cool. It was just the middle was boring for me. But overall, I mean, it's quite well written. And man, oh man, if you think the musical Wicked is gay, like, I'm like Glinda and Elphaba. I'm like, man, stop flirting. I don't want to spoil anything, but like, man, the gal pal is real with this one. But yeah, it's good. I'd recommend it if you like the musical, just to see kind of like where it comes from. Also, while I was reading that, I was listening to the audiobook version of Binti. I did like it. I will say that like after a while, like when, I don't know, when you get into the more action-y sort of things, the way they handle maybe some of the heavier stuff is like, okay, yeah, this is for kids, which is fine. But yeah, I liked it overall. I liked the world building and the overall sort of like moral metaphor kind of stuff. The themes are fairly simple to understand if you're an adult, but they're still nice. It's one of those things where you're reading it as an adult and you're like, yes, this is nice. Some kid in the world like really needed this, you know? It's about a girl who I believe is like high school aged. She's basically on a ship, and by ship I mean like spaceship, on the way to university, where she's gonna study like a bunch of like cool science stuff, and she's like in the future, in case that wasn't obvious, because she's on a spaceship. Very early on in the book, these aliens, whose names I can't remember, sorry, like basically kill everyone else on the ship. And she's, you know, trying to fight back and figure out, why am I not able to like be affected by the aliens? You know, what's different about me and how can I use this to my advantage and all this stuff. I really like it. It's about a strong, awesome, like black high school girl, and I'm like, I love that. Like, get it, girl. In the sciences too. I mean, like, man oh man, is that an underrepresented group in STEM. Overall, really good book. I think whether you're young or older, I think it's an enjoyable read. And now I'm currently reading It Devours. I'm about halfway through, and I'll be honest, I thought I would like this one more than Welcome to Night Vale, because Carlos is my son, so I was like, I knew this one was gonna focus on like the scientists, and I'm like gonna get to see Carlos a little bit more, and I was like, I'm hyped for Carlos. But like, I don't know, I mean, he's certainly there, and there's definitely less Cecil, so that's like not a fair trade-off. Hello, he's like the voice of Night Vale. We need him. I don't know, I think it's just the actual plot of this one hasn't captured me as much. Welcome to Night Vale, I really liked the plot. I liked the two women like kind of helping each other solve this like weird mystery sort of thing. This one, I feel like the mystery's been solved after like 30 pages, and it's like a guy and a girl who are like kind of dating, working together, which just, I can't explain why, it's just not as enticing to me. I don't care about the dynamic. It's not what I thought I came here for, you know? Like, I'm also listening to When Dimple Met Rishi on audiobook right now, and I went into that expecting like, this is gonna be about a guy and a girl who are like dating or something. I don't really know. I know it's a romance, but I thought this was going to be like some cool thing about like weird mystery science, uncanny valley sort of stuff, right? But a lot of it is like, it's about this couple, and it's about like religion, which is cool. Critiquing religion is fun, but I don't know. I'm a religious person, so maybe some of the critiques are just a little bit too much for me. I know it's silly, it's Night Vale, I probably shouldn't take it too seriously, but I'm like, I can't tell if you're trying to be metaphorical, because if you are, I'm a little bit like, rude? What's that, the guy who's like, that's how I feel reading it a little bit. I'm enjoying it, I'm gonna finish it, I'm not gonna be like, you know, all ragey about it, like, oh, they're attacking Christians. Like, I don't think they are, but like, it's just harder for me to find it funny. I still have about 100 pages left, so maybe my views will change. I'll let you guys know. Hey y'all, it's October 25th. I've finished a couple books since the last time I updated you guys, I think like 3. The first one that I finished was It Devours, the second Night Vale book. And I remember last time I was talking about this book, I feel like I had a lot of complaints about it. Everything I complained about, I think, kind of got resolved towards the end. I don't want to give anything away, but there's definitely more Carlos toward the end. And I think that, like, the kind of, I guess, conclusion, overall moral of the book is not, like, totally crapping on religion. So I felt a little bit more okay about that. But yeah, in the end, I liked this book. I read through it really slowly. Something about the Night Vale books, I don't know, I can't place my finger on what it is, because I really should just eat it up, right? Because I love Night Vale. But yeah, I don't know. I read through them so slowly. So it took me a hot minute to finish, but it was good. I would recommend it, especially if you really like Night Vale. But yeah, you know, it was alright. I definitely liked the first one more. Then I listened to my second audiobook, When Dimple Met Rishi. Why do I say Rishi like a white person? When Dimple Met Rishi. But yeah, I liked it. It's about a girl who's in high school and she's going to like a science camp like for coding. That's like her passion is coding. And I was like, that sounds really cool. I love reading some books about some women in STEM. So that's part of the premise. And then the other part of the premise is that she comes from an Indian family and her family really wants her to, you know, like kind of live maybe like the stereotypical Indian vision of what her parents think is a perfect life, you know, be successful but also like get married to like the perfect guy, right? So they set her up without her knowing with Rishi. They're both very different in a lot of ways and they have their similarities too, and throughout the book you're just kind of trying to see like, well, will they overcome their differences, or do I even, you know, want them to overcome their differences? For me, that was a big internal struggle. I was like, do I even want them to like work out, or do I want Dimple to just like go and do her own thing and be an awesome, strong woman? So I feel like they did a good job of like expressing like Dimple's internal conflict, because I was feeling that while I was reading or listening to this book. I also like that it was like pretty slow burn, I guess, in terms of like the romance. It's a romance book, right? But it's not like hit you right off the bat and now they're like kissing all the time and then we have to come up with some like, you know, forced drama to keep the book interesting. I hate when romances do that. I'm not a big romance reader in the first place. So it was nice that like most of the book was them building up their relationship, and that way the drama didn't really happen until the end. Also, it was a little bit more steamy than I expected. It's a book about like high school students, and I think also the fact that I was listening to it on audio made it a little bit awkward, and I'm like, I don't really want to hear about this because these are like kids. Overall, I really liked it. I think Dimple's a really good character, and I think Rishi's also a really nice character. He's like, obviously he likes Dimple and he really wants it to work out, but he's not like a trash guy at all. Like he's cool. So both of the characters are really nice. I felt like their romance like made sense and worked well. And then my only problems with it were unnecessary teen drama that felt forced, and I felt uncomfortable with the steamy parts. And that is a great segue into my next book, Every Heart a Doorway. And one of the reasons that I love this book so very, very much is because there's an asexual main character, and oh my goodness gracious, the main character of this book is Ace, and I'm Ace. I don't know if you knew that, but I chose to read this book in October because I wanted it to coincide with Asexuality Awareness Week, and it was just a delightful little read. My friend Lindsay over at Lindsay Reads has been raving about this series forever. I believe it's like a trilogy, I'm not sure, but I asked for the first one for Christmas and Eric got it for me. I was so grateful, and I finally read it. So the premise of this is basically there's a school for, I think they say, wayward children, and basically kids go there who have been to worlds like Alice in Wonderland or Narnia or, I don't know, like Hogwarts or something, basically storybook worlds, and then they, for whatever reason, get sent out of their world and back into the real world. You know, people think they're crazy, right? Because they're talking about their experiences and they really want to go back to the stories that they were in, and people are like, y'all are crazy. So they get sent to this school, Eleanor West's Home for Wayward Children is what it's called. That premise alone is interesting, and then halfway through it kind of turns into a bit of a like murder mystery sort of thing. People start kind of dropping off and you're like, ooh, what's going on here? Who's killing all these people and why and all that stuff. So it was also a good book for October in that regard, I guess, because it was a little bit mystery. The whole thing is very mystical and magical and stuff. The world building alone is amazing. It made me feel almost like I was reading Harry Potter again, and I haven't had that feeling since I was like a little kid. But yes, back to the representation. The representation in this book is phenomenal. There is an asexual girl, and I only know of like 2 canon ace characters off the top of my head, so like it's not like the pool is that big, but they're both guys. And I was just thrilled to find a teenage girl who's asexual, and I'm just like, oh, this is the most relatable. Every time that she ever talked about her ace stuff, I just like died inside because it was so relatable. I wanted to cry at one point because it was just like, it's so good, you guys. There's also a trans main character, not like the main character, but one of the big characters is trans, and I feel like they handle his, like, transness quite well, too. I can't speak to the trans stuff too much, right, because I'm cis. But from what I do know from the trans people that I'm friends with, I do think that they handled the trans representation quite well. In terms of all the diverse representation in this book, I think that it was done very well because there's a lot of crap going on in this book, right? There's like, people are getting murdered. It would be like unreasonable if it's like, oh no, people are getting murdered. Have I mentioned that I don't care about sex? Like, you know, like it comes up naturally, right? And when it comes up, it's like, oh, that's interesting. Let's move on. And it's only there for like 2 paragraphs, but it's like enough, you know, because that's how it is in real life. It was refreshing. I don't normally say this, but I think I'm gonna say this is my favorite book that I've read this year, and it might be my favorite book that I've read in a really long time, and I'm so excited to read the next few in this series. Hello, I'm back. It's December 2nd. I read 3 books in November. I started 2 like way at the beginning of November and then just like took forever to finish them. The first book that I read was the first book in the Heroes of Olympus series by Rick Riordan. I believe it was called The Lost Hero. I already returned it to Amber, and I really liked it. I gotta say I didn't like it as much as I liked the Percy Jackson books. It's basically continuing the story of Percy and Annabeth and all them, but from the point of view of new characters. And these new characters, for some unknown reason at the beginning, kind of keep thinking in Roman gods instead of Greek gods, and throughout the story you kind of find out that they descended from the same gods when they were in like their Roman phase. So it's really interesting. As an adult, I really appreciate like learning about the different gods and stuff. I don't think I would have cared about that as a kid, but now I think it's really cool. I did have some criticisms. Like, I noticed that I feel like a lot of Rick's main female love interests are very similar. They're like, I'm not like other girls, like, I don't really care about, like, makeup, I can just, like, beat people up and stuff, which is, like, cool. But at the same time, I think that considering that Rick Riordan, like, really prides himself on the diversity in his books, I hope that as I continue reading his books, I see more characters like Drew, for instance, get redeemed. Right now, she's just treated as, like, the jerky mean girl, and I want to be able to see someone similar to Drew, who's like pretty, cares about fashion, really likes boys, like all that stuff, and can also be a nice person. Things that I did like about the book, I love Leo. Leo is like my boy. It's funny because the moment they introduced him, I went, oh my gosh, this character is gonna annoy me so much. He's like one of those characters that just tries to be funny. He's like the sidekick guy. I don't know, I did not like him for about 3 chapters. And then randomly, as soon as he became like, it was the dragon for some reason for me. Him and his dragon were just so cute to me. It's like a boy and his dog, you know, like a boy and his dragon. And him being all like techie, I don't know, I like it. Normally when you see any character whose power is fire, like their whole thing is like, I'm really tough and I'm like gonna beat you up and I'm angry all the time. And Leo has fire, but he's generally not angry. He's just kind of like, I'm chill, you know, I'm here. And he's also like the tech guy. I don't know. He's a non-traditional firepower kind of character. So I really appreciated that. So he really grew on me throughout the book, and now I love him. Throughout the book, Jason, the main character, has like really severe amnesia, and it's really interesting to kind of see everything get pieced together. I feel like it was a little bit tropey at first, I guess, the whole amnesia thing, but by the end of it, I don't know, I guess they explained it well enough that I was like, okay, I can accept that. But overall, I enjoyed it. I don't think this series is gonna be like as good as Percy Jackson for me, but I think I'm going to enjoy it. At the same time that I was reading The Lost Hero, I started reading the book Conversion, and I can't remember the author's name, but I'm not gonna talk about this book very much because I actually DNF'd it, as the booktubers say. I did not finish. And this is the first book that I think I've ever DNF'd, but I guess it's a sign that I'm reading more. But this book is supposed to be about like the Salem witch trials and like kind of a modern take on them, and it sounded really interesting. Whoever it was that I heard about this book from, I feel like they also said they didn't like it, and the Hoopla reviews were pretty low, but I was like, okay, it was the end of October when I started reading it, and I was like, I just want something kind of spooky. And I did not like it. I don't know, I think it was just because it took place in a high school, but it was like a private school with like all the main characters were, not to sound too much like Piper, but you know, they were all Drews. They were all like the girly mean girls that I didn't hang out with in high school. I don't have a problem with books targeting a different demographic, but it did not feel like it was targeted towards me. And it just kept being kind of like the same kind of character tropes, and I just found it, I felt really distant from the characters. I couldn't relate to them. So honestly, I don't remember what happened in this book. I don't remember the author's name because I just didn't get far into it. But yeah, Conversion, I tried it, I did not enjoy it. Sorry. The next book I listened to on Hoopla, I did enjoy a lot more. It was The Opposite of Loneliness by Marina Keegan. I don't remember every detail, but basically Marina Keegan was a Yale student, I believe, who died really young. And following her death, a collection of her stories was published, and that's what The Opposite of Loneliness is. So in a sort of ironic way, a lot of the stories are about like life and what you want out of life. Towards the end of last year or the beginning of this year, I think a lot of booktubers were recommending this book. It sat on my to-read list for a little bit too long. I totally forgot that it was a collection of short stories, so I guess I went into it kind of expecting it to be like a normal novel, and that kind of threw me off. Like for the first, I don't know, hour almost of listening, the way the audiobook was set up was also a little bit confusing because there aren't chapter numbers or anything. So one short story would end and then the reader, who did a great job by the way, would just say the title of the next short story and then go into it. And maybe it's because I was listening on 1.5 speed, but sometimes I would not notice when a new story had started and I was like, whoa, wait, and I would have to go back and like find where the last story ended and the new one started. But other than that, once I got into the groove of listening to short stories, I liked it a lot. Definitely some of the early on stories I felt like I didn't enjoy that much. I don't know, the way the book was organized, I feel like they started out with a lot of these stories that were about like being in college and doing a bunch of drugs and having a bunch of sex. And I'm like, can't relate. But it was so well written that I was thinking, well, just because you can't relate to something doesn't mean that you can't enjoy it. So I continued listening and I enjoyed hearing about like experiences that are different from my own. At the end there's also a nonfiction section, which I really liked that too. I found it really interesting and I guess I wasn't expecting it. So yeah, that's The Opposite of Loneliness. I really liked it. And the last book that I read in November was Bad Feminist by Roxane Gay. I asked for this for Christmas because I really just wanted any Roxane Gay book. This is another one that I did not realize is a collection of essays. So I was kind of expecting a big nonfiction work where all the chapters were kind of cohesive. Again, once I adjusted and realized, oh duh, this is a collection of essays, I enjoyed it more. The first section is called Me, and it's just Roxane Gay talking about like her life. I really found it interesting that she's apparently really into Scrabble, so she talks about these Scrabble competitions that she would go to. I found that really fun to read about. The next section was honestly my least favorite. It was Gender and Sexuality. And I know, I feel like I keep bringing up my aceness when I talk about these books, but I can't help it. Books just keep making me think about my asexuality. So one thing that Roxane Gay seems to be a little bit weird about is suggesting that like all women want sex, and if you're representing a woman in media and she doesn't want sex, you're portraying women incorrectly. She definitely hints at that quite a lot, and that bothers me a little bit. She accused the Hunger Games of having like an unrealistic amount of kissing and like no sexual content, and I'm like, well, it's targeted at teenagers. I don't know, I thought that was a little bit of a silly criticism. So she does that a couple, like maybe 5 times throughout the series of essays. So that section didn't really do it for me, but then she really brought it back in the race section. What did she call it? Politics, Gender, and Race. And I really liked this section because it was a lot of new information for me, I guess. Like the more general feminism, like gender, sexuality stuff, like I'm like, okay, I already know these things. So like generally I was like, okay, yeah. And I was just like nodding along, right? I was like, yeah, preach it, sister. But in the race section, she is a black woman, I am white, and I learned things, which is what I was really hoping to get out of this book. So that was my favorite section. Like she talks a lot about movies that are made by black people or made by white people and star black people. Movies like The Help, Django Unchained. I found it really useful to hear a black person's perspective on those movies as someone who, when The Help came out, everyone around me was going, oh, a feel-good movie about like a white person helping all the black ladies. So it was really nice to see a different perspective. It ironically makes me want to watch The Help again as not a little high school student. But yeah, overall, it is a good book and I feel like I learned a lot. Hey there, it is technically January, it's January 3rd. I started 2 books in December and I finished one, and the other one I'm still working on, so I'm just gonna count this one and then count the other one as 2020. But the book that I just finished was an audiobook, The Storied Life of A.J. Thickery by Gabriel Zevin. It's about kind of like a jaded old guy who owns a bookstore, and one day someone drops off a baby at the doorstep of his bookstore, and it's the story of him, you know, raising this daughter that was just kind of given to him Harry Potter style, and how he falls in love, and how his daughter and the woman that he, like, falls in love with kind of change him, I guess. I'm not gonna lie, like, this book did not do it for me, as you can probably tell by my horrible synopsis of it. There were things that I liked, and I will mention those too, but there were definitely some things that I did not like. The big one for me was that as a linguist reading this, there was a lot of, like, linguistic weirdness. I felt like when Maya was basically a newborn baby, I know that she's supposed to be, like, abnormally smart and verbal and stuff, but, like, at times it felt like her vocabulary was way higher compared to her grammatical ability. And I know that, you know, maybe sometimes babies really do develop that way, but it felt like half the things she was saying were just there for, like, plot purposes, and I was like, a baby would not say that in that situation. I don't know. And then at the end, this is a major spoiler, by the way, AJ gets, like, cancer, and it's giving him aphasia symptoms. And the aphasia is unlike any type of aphasia I've ever heard of. I feel like the author was mixing fluent aphasia and non-fluent aphasia into just one sort of thing that doesn't really exist, and that bothered me. The other linguistic thing that bothered me was just kind of like, I don't know, I can't think of a good noun for this, but like AJ's stuck in his ways-ness. He's very much like, this is the kind of book that I like, and these are the kind of books that I don't like, and you can't change my mind. And that's how he is at the beginning of the book, and you're like, oh, well, maybe by the end of the book he changes, but he really doesn't. In fact, one of the books that he, like, gave a chance, later in the story, it turns out that the author of that book that he read was not who they said they were, and all this weird stuff. So it's like, basically, if you have a comfort zone, don't leave it, was kind of the moral I got out of that. What else did I not enjoy? There was one more thing that I felt like mentioning. Yes. Dude, I just looked this up. I was shook. It's written by a woman, and that surprised me, because the women in this story are so male-gazy. There's this part where his wife sits down on the counter, and instead of saying she sat down on the counter, they said she sat her generous bum on the counter. And I'm like, her generous bum? What? Every woman in this book just feels like one-dimensional, I guess, and like very like stereotypical. Oh yeah, and then my other big overarching complaint about this book was that it just kind of felt like an author like circle jerking with other people who like books. The biggest theme in the book is that people who like books are awesome. And I'm like, cool. I like to read books, but I'm not like, I don't like it so much that I'm just like gonna read a book about that concept and be like, yes, I am like the coolest person in the world because I'm a book person. Woohoo! Like, that concept just was not doing it for me. Let me think about the things that I did like about it. I liked the world that she set up. It takes place on like an island where very few people live, and it's very like, I don't know, it feels like a Hallmark movie. It was a little bit fun to imagine the world of like a little tiny island where the community is really tight and close-knit. I actually enjoyed the plot. Throughout the book, you're getting these little excerpts of notes that AJ has written about different short stories, and you're like, who is he writing these notes to? Is he writing them for himself, or is he writing them for someone else? I don't know. And then throughout the course of the book, it becomes apparent who he's writing those for, and that's kind of cool to see that come together. You also see a lot of stuff come together about Maya's birth mother and like how she wound up at AJ's doorstep, and the way all that stuff comes together I thought was good, but other aspects of it just did not jive well with me. It's kind of unfortunate that this is like the last book I read this year, but yeah, that's the end of my 2019 reads. I think I'm gonna do this again next year. I actually really liked being able to record like my initial reactions. So Bear and I are gonna say bye, and yeah, bye.